And now, our guest speaker today, Reverend Joanna Gabriel, and the importance of pruning.
Good morning, everyone. It's great to be with you this morning on this dark kind of a morning where it feels good to just kind of cozy up with a cup of coffee and a blanket. It's great to be here. I hope you're doing okay. I'm sending you love and light from Whidbey Island. And as our world just gets more and more interesting, I had an experience a week or so ago that I want to share with you. And for those of you who are gardeners that have been gardeners for many, many years, this is going to sound kind of elementary as we get into it. But I'm not a gardener. I haven't been a gardener. I appreciate gardens. I love flowers and vegetables and everything. And I really appreciate the work that gardeners do. But I've never been one myself. My mother was one. She was the kind of person that people would say, when Dottie puts the clothespin in the ground, it grows. Well, and she was like that, but she didn't teach me any of that. And so it was unknown to me. It's always been kind of mysterious to me how people have this relationship with the garden. Anyway, in the house where I'm living now, my housemate has a beautiful garden, just a gorgeous garden, but her health challenges have made it so that she's not able to do much in the garden anymore. So I was noticing some things in the garden felt like they were getting kind of wild and crazy out there. And to me, I know some things. I know what some things look like. Like I know pretty much what the flowers look like. But there's some other things like grasses and some other kinds of ornamental kind of weeds and things that to me do look just like a weed, but I don't know if they're a weed or if they're supposed to be there or not. And so I don't touch them because I don't want to upset what's going on there. So anyway, things were starting to get kind of crazy. And my friend who you know, who's been with you before, Annie Lonardelli, came over to visit and she said, wow, this garden's getting kind of crazy out here. And she took a clipper and she went out and she started, you should be clipping this back and these are done. You should be cutting that back and you should be pruning this. And it's like, whoa, okay, really? I didn't know. So I checked with my housemate and she said, oh my goodness, if you would do that, I will go and buy you a new shiny new set of clippers so that you have the state of the art right tool for the job. If you're willing to do that, I would really appreciate it. So I said, well, okay, I'm happy to do it. I don't really know what I'm doing, but okay. So Annie had shared with me, we have this big overgrown bush that apparently is what's known as a catmint. And she said, you have to cut this all back because underneath there's all this new growth that isn't getting any energy, isn't getting any light, isn't getting any of the water or anything because of all this overgrowth. You need to cut this back. So one afternoon, or I guess it was morning, I went out there and I was kind of nervous about it because I know, as I said, you gardeners would think this is really silly, but I never did it before. And I thought, oh boy, am I going to kill the thing or what's going to happen here? So anyway, I start clipping what looks to be the over stuff that's kind of dry and not doesn't have, it's kind of dull colored and everything. So I start cutting that back. And as I noticed, because this was a great big plant, bushy kind of thing. And so I start cutting it back and cutting it back. And sure enough, underneath there was all this beautiful, young, deep green, tender new leaves coming up, trying to see the sun, but weren't because of all this straggly stuff that had had its day and needed to go. And so I started doing it, and I don't know about you, but there's a sense of power that comes when you're wielding a pair of clippers. And I'm clipping away, and wow, this is really great. And pretty soon I'm looking over there, gee, that looks like that should be clipped. And so I started clipping that, and we had some salvia over here, and I clipped that back. And oh my goodness, this is fun. So pretty soon, I thought I better take a breath before I had the entire garden chopped down. so so I did, but afterwards everything felt much better, and I started thinking about it, and I sat out in the garden and just sat with it and meditated a little bit, and started realizing, as I often do, those of you, Michael, and those of you who give talks and stuff know that everything is fodder for a talk. There's a talk in everything somewhere if you look deeply enough. And so I was thinking about it and realizing, after our last time together, when I was talking about holy ground and the story of Moses in the burning bush, and about how God told Moses to say, "I am that I am." Those are powerful words, and we said them together. And they're very powerful words anytime you say them. Very powerful words. And they aren't that powerful if you don't believe it. They're powerful words in and of themselves. You can kind of feel it a little bit, but it may not have an effect in your life until you actually believe it. And so I was sitting with that, and it was like, well, what gets in the way of my believing it? And what I realized is that it's about spiritual pruning. The idea that our connection to the divine is always there, always has been, always will be. That there's nothing there, that's always there. It's not going anywhere. It's always there. And it's our choice to be open to it. We choose it. It doesn't come in on top of us. It doesn't force us into anything. We've talked about this many times. God, divine essence, loves us so much that it loves us and allows us to choose our way home. And it takes as long as it takes. But it is a choice. It's always a choice. We have to choose, I am that I am. We have to choose to be open to that connection. And one of the things that happens over the course of our lifetime is that when we don't do our spiritual pruning, things from the past, our fears, our doubts, our wounds, our negative thoughts that hang around, get cluttered up, and they become like overgrowth over the top of that opening to our divine connection. The connection's still there, it doesn't go anywhere ever. But we can say yes to it and still have a sense of separation, in a sense that if there's stuff that's over the top of that connection. Does that make sense? Do you get that? Can you relate to that there might be beliefs, negative stuff from the past, wounds, grief, sadness, fears, doubts, what's going on in the world?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so it can be like an overgrowth, like in front of, have you ever been out in the woods and you're moving into a dark place? Maybe you're going into the opening of a little cave or something. Sometimes there'll be overgrowth that you have to get through. You may have to have a knife or a machete or something to cut it away to give you access to the opening. That's what we're talking about here. And one of the things that I found very interesting about all that is we know that prayer and meditation is very, very important. In fact, it's vital. In fact, it's mentioned in the 5 basic unity principles that prayer and meditation is very, very important. It's part of who we are. It's part of how we practice our spiritual life. It's very, very necessary. And prayer and meditation are only, okay, just a second. There. Prayer and meditation are only as powerful or as useful or as effective for us as we have access to the opening. That is our connection to the divine. And there are those of us who feel or believe that all we have to do is do more prayer and meditation. And that if we're not not feeling a really strong connection to God or to the divine or divine light or divine love, that it's because we're not praying right, or we're not meditating enough. You know what? That's not it. We need to do our spiritual pruning. In the past, we've talked about this a little bit. You've heard the term, and you've heard me use the term, spiritual bypass. Spiritual bypass was coined by a wonderful doctor, a psychotherapist who is also a Buddhist. He's made his transition now, Dr. John Welwood. And he coined the phrase spiritual bypass back in the 80s. And what he meant by it was a tendency to use spiritual ideas and practices to sidestep or avoid facing unresolved emotional issues, psychological wounds, and unfinished developmental tasks. And so what that all means to me is that I can't meditate my grief away. It doesn't work like that. I have to let it go. I have to forgive myself. I have to forgive the other. I have to make room so that my prayer and meditation can be effective. Do you see the difference there? There's a letting go process. There's a releasing. There's some work we need to do to clear out the overgrowth, to open up that connection so that our prayer and meditation can be effective, that we can make that connection. There are many of us who pray and meditate and still feel separate and figure, well, I guess I'm not a divine being, or I guess I'm not doing it right. No, that's not it, dear ones. That's not it. Time for some pruning. Questions or comments about this? Anybody? You'll need to unmute yourself.
Yes, Joanna.
Yes.
Oh, gee, this is so familiar with just moving, downsizing, and but also with the prayer and the meditation, just sitting still and listening. I don't do that well, and so when I sit and pray and meditate, I need, my pruning is just letting go of the need to be busy and moving and doing anything, acting.
Yeah, there
Sitting
you go.
with it like you did after you prune the neighbor's or your roommate's garden. So that's how it works for me.
Thank you, Nora. Indeed. Sometimes it can be very simple, very simple. And when you know, as she does, what she needs to do, she can then drop into her center and make that connection. It isn't that the connection's not there. It isn't that she's not doing it right. She just needs to take that initial step to get clear, to breathe and drop in and let go of the busyness for a while. Or sometimes it's a bigger thing even than that. As I said, it may be a long time wound. It may be some fear, anger, resentment, grief. Anybody else?
Yes. So while you're speaking, what came to my mind was the 12 steps. So the 12 steps of AA, of course, there were a bazillion other groups that, that have embraced those steps. And my first husband was an alcoholic, so I was involved in the 12-step program of Al-Anon. But it's just how powerful it brings you through, the whole process. When you said it takes work, it just reminded me of the work that I had to go through, and it was work.
Yeah, it is.
But it was a part of the process of pulling me through like the machete you're talking about, cutting through those vines. So there was work involved in then the letting go. It was made me realize how quite that was quite those steps are quite not endeavor. The Bill or whoever they put all these steps on paper for people to use. It's just that's what that reminded me of, the work.
Yeah.
And how I go, wow, they were pretty spot on there.
Yes, indeed. It's why
Yeah.
people all over the world have used those steps.
Yes.
Powerful work. And indeed, what are they all about? Letting go of the baggage,
Yes.
letting go of all the stuff that's gotten in the way of us being who we
Yes.
truly are.
And of course,
And-
Course
Go
of
ahead. Go ahead,
Miracles
Jimmy.
talks about, Course of Miracles talks about blocks of love's awareness, getting rid of the blocks of love's awareness, same thing.
Indeed. Yes. Yes. And that's necessary. And I had a friend who lost her beloved husband. Well, it's been 11 years ago now. And she was in such grief, and she just couldn't deal with her grief. But what she would do was meditate and go to meditation retreats and meditate, and she meditates, and I think she's in like three different groups every week in meditation, which is great. It's wonderful. But what she hasn't done is deal with her grief. And so 11 years later, she still hasn't cleaned out her husband's office or his garage. All his stuff is still there.
Mhm.
And it's been 11 years because she hasn't been able to do it, because she hasn't done that work. She hasn't done that pruning. That whether it would be through steps or psychological work or support or writing or whatever it is. There isn't a right way. It's the way that works for you is the right way. And there may be a combination of things, but it's necessary. And if we don't do it, it doesn't matter how much we pray and meditate. Do you see? Prayer meditation is essential, but we're only making a partial connection if our opening is overgrown with stuff, with baggage, with history. You see? Anybody else?
After doing all that work, the prayer and meditation is your support through all the work that you do, and coming out the other side is like, yeah, it's a spiritual awakening, and it's amazing.
Yes. Yes, it sure is. And it doesn't, for some people, it takes a long time. For others, it doesn't take that long. There's no time limit on it. Like, if I didn't take 10 years, it probably didn't work. No, it could take, it could take an afternoon. It could take a walk in the woods if you're really focused.
Right.
It's just doing that, making this choice, saying yes to it, having the intention for a clear connection to source. That's what we're up to here. And that's what we need right now, because our world is ablaze in disconnection. Is it not? Ablaze
It is.
on every level.
Like a burning bush experience.
Indeed. And now we're all smelling the smoke too.
Yeah.
It's-
I like the smoke.
And so, it's getting so close, isn't it? I mean, shifts and changes, it's getting so intense. And it's in our faces all the time, dear ones. You're not alone in this. We're all feeling it. And so it's important for us as we come together as spiritual family is to support each other in strengthening our connection. because it's always there. And if we're not feeling it, what is it that we need to do? Have you seen that cartoon about, what is it? I can't feel God, and God says, who moved? It's not God. It's not the divine. It's the variable is what we're willing to say yes to, what we're willing to allow. Because when we look at our world and what's going on, if each of us got this, if each of us stopped in our tracks right now, in this moment of now, breathed, dropped into our heart and prayed together, I am that I am, and we're all one, how instantaneously would this world shift? How could it not?
What you think? Leave here.
Questions or comments? Now, there's another point on this that I found was interesting. I looked up, did a little research on the idea of spiritual pruning. And oh my goodness, it was out there. I was kind of surprised. I hadn't really heard it like that before. But there is a, I guess you would say, it would be accurate to say in fundamental Christianity, the idea of God's pruning is big.
Mm-hmm.
And that God's pruning us. God's in there pruning all the time. And our issue is to decide whether it's punitive or restorative. That's our challenge. And I got to tell you, that doesn't ring true for me. To me, that speaks to the whole life is happening to us, not through us. That God in the Old Testament that's coming after you, because he's mad and he's going to get revenge. The wrath of God, my God. Going to bring the clippers. You like that over there? Boom, off it comes. That doesn't, and it's really out there. I didn't know that. I would have to disagree with that. That doesn't feel true. And you know what's true for you, but that doesn't feel true to me. I have no doubt that the divine essence celebrates as we clear the overgrowth, anything that impedes or gets in the way of our connection with Source, and supports us in that.
As you say, the universe always says yes.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. It's all it's got.
Mm-hmm.
All it is ever expanding. That's all. It's only yes. There could be no no. Not possible.
Right.
You know,
So, go ahead.
no, I was thinking about the same thing what you were saying about all this and not subscribing to that belief that God is out to do us in or take us down like another, Noah build the ark. But at the same time, I'm feeling like with all these fires and smoke, there is something that I need to listen to in that. And that something that I've heard out there was, if I don't take the time to take care of my body will make that if I don't make that decision, my body will make it for me. So with all these fires, that's the message, is that maybe we need to be staying in and taking care of ourselves and focusing on other things than, like taking care of ourselves and, our homes and each other, that there's opportunities that have arisen that we might not have taken if all this hadn't happened.
Well, that's true. Absolutely, Nora. And it's also showing us that while we've been fooling around arguing about whether climate change exists, Mother Nature is saying, dear ones, hello,
Yes.
is this thing on?
That's
Hello.
that yes.
Hello.
And so we're getting down to it here. We're getting down to it.
Mm-hmm.
And we're in it now. And so the opportunities then, as Nora, as we're making those choices to take care of ourselves, pull in our sides and regroup,
Mm-hmm.
make different choices.
Mm.
We also have got to make different choices
This is.
for our world,
Mm-hmm.
for how we're doing things, what we're
Yes.
using, what we need to conserve, what we need to stop doing. We need to change some of our ways. We've gotten so complacent about so many things. We're so spoiled about so many things. We all love plastic.
Yep.
What's it doing to the planet? And there's no more wiggle room, is there?
Mm-mm.
And so we have to start paying attention. So these things we talked about here, they really become important, not to scare us, but to empower us to see how that we can change, how we can have an effect, how we can be part of the solution. Because you and I doing our spiritual pruning is part of the solution, because we're going to strengthen that connection in here. And so as we start dropping into our heart, where we are connected to all that is, we're going to start making our choices from there. We're going to start seeing solutions rise from here into our mind, and we make new choices, and we have the strength and willingness to do it that we maybe didn't have before, or maybe not as strongly, or we didn't have as much willingness. Now, are we getting pushed? Yeah. Yeah. But it's not about having our backs against the wall. It's about opening our hearts to the truth of us and letting that come forth and take lead. We'll be fine. That is the promise. It always has been. Jesus said, the kingdom of God is within you. Look there. So let's take a moment to do exactly that. Let's look here. Breathe in. As Nora says, take some deep breaths. Let's support our just dropping down into the chest area. You can very physically into the chest area, where your lungs are, where your heart is. That's no accident. If it feels comfortable, you can put your hands here and just breathe. If it feels comfortable, close your eyes. And breathe. And as you feel comfortable breathing and just feeling what this feels like, does it feel comfortable? Does it feel kind of tight or tense? It's okay. There's no right or wrong. Just breathe into however it feels. Soften into the heart. And maybe as you're breathing, you might be walking towards your own inner garden, on the path into your own beautiful inner garden. And if you have an image there, maybe you'll notice, is there anything that could use some pruning? Is there some overgrowth? Are there some branches that need to be cleared out to give you more room, more access to your center, to your source? And you can do that work in your imaging. It's very powerful. It's very helpful. And you might say to yourself, I give myself permission to let go. I give myself permission to let go. I give myself permission to release the past. I give myself permission to forgive myself. Divine beloved, sweet spirit, universal source, all that is. Come forth in me now. I'm clearing the way. Come forth. Fill me to overflowing. Fill up every part of me, body, mind, and spirit. Fill me until I am lifted up. Lifted, and I can feel the radiance and the warmth of divine light. And that radiance and that light spills out from me, out into the room, out through the house, out through my neighborhood, out through Bremerton, the peninsula, the islands, the state, the country, the planet. And that light fills all life, and all life is lifted up. And if there is someone in particular who could really use this light right now, who could really use a reminder that they are always connected to the divine, even in the midst of whatever it is they're dealing with. If there's someone you'd like to hold in this awareness right now, feel free to say their names out loud so that we might hold them with you. For all these we mentioned, for all our brothers and sisters, for Marilyn, for anyone else in our spiritual family in this moment of now, for Robert, for Sally, Candace. Oh, we had so many wonderful hearts and lights in our midst. For all of those, and for everyone, for all who are suffering, for all the firefighters, for all the people who are displaced in Oregon, in California, in Washington, for all the wildlife, for our air and our water. We call forth divine order, divine light, divine love. And in so doing, we're all lifted up. And the highest good, the highest outcome is already unfolding. Let it be so, and so it is. Blessings, everyone. Thank you.